that are included in this particular plan will be able to be financed based on projections from some of the revenue sources we had, like local option sales tax, road use tax, water and sewer funds, or electric funds. So there's a long-range financial analysis that's tied to this. There is a bit of an art form here, as you'll see, how we try to plan out our debt service for general obligation bonds, and again, some of the other expenditures that are included in our budget, so we can cover in our in our utilities, both the operating costs and capital improvements over the next 5 years. If you don't mind, we'll go quickly through the document itself. We're trying to give you some information on this. The document is actually online now for all the citizens. We are going to go through the document with the department heads tonight, just to go over the highlights, not every page, but if we skip something you do want to go over, please interrupt us. It's in a workshop format. Next week, we'll try to get some input from the public, but I don't want them to think, or you to think, that's the last time for public input or your final decisions will be made. You'll make your final decisions on this document when you approve the budget in your February meetings, okay? Remember, this is a plan, so you can see many of the projects could move forward or backward depending on what changes in the year. The key year is the first year, because if you see it in the first year in fiscal year 2019, that will be included now in my budget recommendation that will be coming out to you in the next 2 weeks. So it will impact perhaps property taxes or some of our utility rates too. So we don't want to change or adjust the 1920 budget right now. We want to wait until you see the total picture together before you make any decisions on that. Okay, so we'll go through the budget. We'll go through the document, and we'll start off with public safety, right? I think Chuck and Chuck will talk about the public safety for police first, if that's all right.
Yes, the first document to address is the citywide radio system, and there is a page printed in front of you that I'd like you to refer to. This is a dynamic enterprise. So we've updated some of the information in there for you. This is the second year of the City County University radio replacement process. Second year that it's showing up in the CIP. As a reminder, this serves all of our emergency responders and public service agencies across the city, county, and university. So it's really a shared enterprise. The Iowa State University Purchasing Department is managing the RFP process for all of these entities, and we have 2 bidders currently negotiating to provide a replacement radio system. Based on the work by the consultant, we have increased the estimated infrastructure cost in this CIP sheet to $1.75 million. It's our best guess on where that is likely to end up. You'll also note that Fire has applied for a radio grant, which, if it's awarded, may offset some of the costs associated with this project. It is likely that there will be adjustment to the project cost, bond amount, and departmental expense as we work through the rest of this negotiation process, identify a recommended vendor, and finalize a contract. We expect that most of that will occur yet this spring, and hope to be moving into the construction phase maybe as soon as this summer.
Okay. So what, just the outdoor warning system while you're here?
I think Don's going to handle the outdoor.
Oh, Don is.
system.
I'm sorry. Rich.
Good evening. I'll have you guys on page 11. We'll start out with apparatus replacement for fire. You can see on there we have 2 vehicles that we have advanced up. The first one is our truck 3. It's the city's one and only ladder truck. It's a 105-foot Pierce that we have. That was purchased back in 2002 and it's due for replacement. You can see in 2021, and that'll be a purchase price of $1.25 million. We also have money set aside in there to refurbish the current truck that we have, $125,000 for that. It's Pierce Midwest Refurbishment Center in Wisconsin is one of the vendors that does that. And what they do is they go through the truck, they replace seals, go through the pump, the ladder. By getting that refurbished, that allows us to have 2 ladder trucks in town. So when one goes out for service, we won't have to rely on our neighbors to actually have a ladder truck come into town. So that'll be a a great investment for our community to have 2 ladder trucks available for us at that time. We've also have engine 1 that's due to be replaced. We bumped that up to 22, 23. That was purchased back in 2005. Unfortunately, the maker of that has gone out of business and has made parts extremely hard to find. In fact, we're having some manufactured. So we've bumped that up and got that on the schedule to get replaced sooner than later. Just with Iowa roads, unfortunately, the underbodies do not wear very well. We also, to purchase these, we have geo bonds that we'll do. So with the larger vehicle purchase, such as our engine and truck, we don't depreciate those out through our budget. It's really expensive to do that type of process. So we'll actually go out for a geo bond for both these purchases. And we will not typically we try to keep an engine as a reserve. We'll try to get it refurbished. But with engine 1 status just being so far to the point where we don't see an opportunity to refurbish it, it's just not, doesn't make sense economically to do that.
Okay. Any other questions on that? Moving the utilities? Rich. Don's here, I think. He's not still eating. He's probably here, don't you think? Electric services. Starts on page 17. Yes, we are.
All right, I'm gonna get my cool toys. Actually, if you want to pass those around, I'll be talking about those in a second. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Donald Kahn, Director of Electric Services. So what Steve is passing around as I'm going through the budget, I'll be talking about boiler tubes. And what Steve has in his hand, he has a brand new boiler tube, is the thick one. And the thin tube there is what happens to it after a while by burning refuse-driving fuel if you burn that in untreated metal. And one of the things that we're moving towards is something called an Inconel overlay. This is applied by a laser, and this is actually, the tube thickness is wrong, but this is what we're looking at putting on our boiler tubes, which is a coating that will protect our tubes from the harsh burning within a plant. One more. All right. So before I start with electric, I wanted to talk a little bit about the city's emergency storm warning system. This is a project that we jointly do with our fire department, or excuse me, our police department. What we have in that budget right now is we're looking at putting an additional storm siren in the current year. That's a $40,000 add-in that was put into the budget. And we're looking at purchasing another one for fiscal year 1920. That sheet is, do we have the number? I don't have the page number.
It's under
Page
14. Page 14
That
above
is
it.
correct. Thank you. So I don't know, I'll start with that one. If you have any questions on the public safety, we have a fairly robust storm siren system. And by adding these two, we're looking at putting out one in the research park, continuing down, and we're looking at putting another one out in the industrial park as that gets developed. So one will be put out in the industrial park this year, and then one will be added to the research park.
So we're going to be adding one in the eastern industrial area before it's populated?
One of the things that we did was when we annexed that territory, there are existing homes out there.
That's
So
true.
we want to be cognizant of those individuals out there and support what would be now City of Ames residents. Okay. All right, so going through our sheets, and in the book, we list them in a unique order where we talk about transmission, distribution, and then we talk about power plant. And for reasons for EPA and things like that, we talk about power plant, what would normally be capital and what would normally be considered maintenance. When I go through the sheets tonight, I'm going to do it a little bit differently because I want to go through them from a standpoint of let's talk about our transmission and our distribution projects. And then when we get into the generation, I've broken them actually down by the units. And so it'll be, I'm going to move you through a few different pages, but it'll be all of the same information, but organized in a way that we can talk about each of the different 4 of the generators that we have. So the major groups I'm going to talk about is our transmission. Defining transmission is the high voltage power lines, the 69,000 volt and the 161,000 volt lines that we have. And then in the power plant, I'll talk about it from a plant standpoint, then an associated standpoint, and then others that typically fall into the greater power plant standpoint. Overall, our budget for the next 5 years, our capital budget's a little over $31 million. A lot of it's going to come in the first year, and it's going to be really focusing on the power plants themselves. We want to get them up and prepared to burn refuse-derived fuel for the long haul. Hence, if you look at the condition of those pipes and what we're trying to put into those boiler tubes, it's important that we get that done. So, next slide, please. All right, so from a transmission standpoint, again, this is the high voltage. One of the things you've seen in our budgets for the last few years is our 69,000 volt transmission reconstruction. There's kind of an example of it up in the upper right-hand corner. But we have some older poles, and we got to continue to go in and replace anything that is we think is going to fail in the future. We want to be proactive rather than reactive. And that's found on page 19. Within there, then basically we set aside roughly $500,000 a year, and we've got certain areas that we're focusing on in that CIP where we'll start going in and replacing poles as needed to continue keeping those lines alive. The second one, from a transmission standpoint, we're currently working on Tappahallo this year, where we're adding some breakers. So if you ever get up to Tappahallo, you can see that work is progressing right now. Another place where we need to put in breakers that basically separate the Ontario Road substation is on Ontario Road. And we have that project basically on page 20. And that's roughly about $1.3 million for that. The numbers on the lower right, so then what we're showing here is basically, so in fiscal year 2019, 2020, from a transmission distribution standpoint, we're only spending about $1 million. But if I look at the overall 5-year budget, it looks like we're spending about 25% of our capital budget on transmission and distribution. Which would then mean that the remaining 75% is going to be spent on the power plant. Next slide, please. Okay, from a power plant standpoint, we basically have 4 units. We have 2 peaking units. They're called gas turbines or combustion turbines. On combustion turbine 1, this is our older unit put in the 60s. The communication equipment that we have between the main power plant and that one is fairly outdated. So we have a project to basically replace the remote terminal unit, the meters, and the relaying and things like that. We're missing some slides. Can you go back a second? There should be another whole group of transmission slides. There it is. Whoop.
There it is.
There it is. Oh, that feel better. Okay, before we get to power plant, the other half of the transmission side is we do have projects where we're continuing as a capital project to replace LED streetlights. And this is a 5-year project. We still have a few more years to go. By the end of this year, we'll be at about 55% changed out. And the approach that we took, rather than spend a lot of money in year 1 and bring in crews and change everything out, anytime we touch a light, whether it's changing out a pole, the light bulb itself, or the masthead or anything, we automatically put up an LED. And that way, we're maximizing the use of our maintenance time, but it's just taking us longer to get that changed out. Once the CIP is done, then all future LED changeouts and installations will be done under our operation and maintenance. So we will be done by the time that this CIP is done. And we should be concluded by the 21-22 timeframe. The second line up there, the second line up there is street lights and line relocation. This is a budget line item that we show in here where we're working with our brothers and sisters in Public Works. So as they are updating Welch, for instance, or in recent past Kellogg and things like that, we have to go in and either replace streetlights or we'll go in and take a look at how our underground and overhead structures are in there. So we have over the next 5 years about $1 million set aside on the electric side of Public Works' projects. So that's what that is. Then we have some reliability improvements that we're looking at doing at various substations. None of these projects are new. These were all here last year. So at Dayton Avenue, we want to upgrade the switch gear. It's a piece of equipment that basically we're going from old electromechanical to digital, so they operate much faster. It's not moving parts. It's all done electronically. Mortensen Road, that happens to be the smaller picture in the center there, kind of hard to see. But there's no protection, what we call protection on the transformer. So if you have a fault on the wrong side of a transformer, it could do some damage to it. So we want to go in there and put some transformer protection equipment on both sides. So because transformers these days are a $500,000 item, and we'd rather have that protected for any kind of fault that would cause catastrophic damage.
Why, Don, why wouldn't have that been in there before? Is this something new?
It has been in the CIP for the last few years.
But why don't we have that equipment in place now?
I can't tell you when the sub was originally laid out, what they had considered in there and why it was left out. It's just something that we think it's prudent to do. A fault into a transformer is rare. So it's not like, there's even a 1% chance of it happening. But because it could happen, that's why we're looking at doing it now.
Okay.
Then the last one up there is VetMed substation switchgear, and this is similar to what we're doing at Dayton Avenue. We're looking at putting in solid state equipment and get rid of the electromechanical. Now we can let's talk power plant for a second. All right, so as I was mentioning before, combustion turbine 1 is our older peaking unit. We're looking at putting in remote terminal equipment. It's a fairly low-cost item. This is actually new. It's about $140,000 in our budget, and this should be found on page 40. This is where I apologize, I'm going to jump around a little bit on pages, but it allows me to talk about each generating unit in a group. Combustion turbine 2, this was a newer unit that we installed in 2005, I believe, and we're looking at a couple things. Controls upgrade again. 2005 doesn't seem that far away, but if you think about a computer from 2005 and what a computer looks like today, light years have happened in terms of controls and things like that. The other thing that's up there, which is kind of new, a gas turbine 2 building. When GT2 was bought, it actually was originally set to go to the desert. Okay, that's okay. It's a good generating unit. However, they don't have freezing and thawing conditions in the desert. So we have a lot of equipment that is not centrally located, and we're going through a lot of efforts to put heat tape out there in the wintertime. We've had some freezing and thawing issues at times. And by the best answer that we can come up with is you put a building over it and heat the whole thing is much better for the equipment. So that's what that project is. A building to cover, it's about $150,000 is what we have in the budget for that.
Question, Don?
Sir.
On the combustion turbines, how often are those used in a typical year?
Typically, we will run a combustion turbine for two reasons. One, for price, and these things costed about $250 a megawatt hour to run, compared to our unit down on Main Street, which is about $38 to run. We haven't been seeing prices that would drive that. The second reason we would run it is for reliability. If we had a power line go down or anything like that, these units would be the things that would come on, and they start very, very quickly. So we have reliable power to our customers and could have them online in under a half hour.
So I understand that that's why they're there, but in practice, how often have they been used?
Under 100 hours a year.
Thank you.
And Steve was mentioning to me that they're also used at time of peak. Again, that's a price thing, but when we're typically peaking, which is in the summer season, there are times when we would like to have generation online here. Again, from a reliability standpoint, we're not importing stuff. We have the capability to cover all of our loads here if we want to. Okay. Next one, please. One of our two baseload units, Unit 7, we have several projects that are going on there. And again, many of these projects have been in past CIPs. We have delayed some of these by maybe a year or two because we want to focus, our primary need for both units is boiler tube. And I think Mr. Schenker mentioned that in his budget highlights, how we've shifted some things that were less critical than boiler tubes. This happens to be one of those projects where we've actually delayed it a year so that we can spend our resources on boiler tubes. So condenser tube replacement. The condenser itself it's the, boy, those pictures don't come out very big, but basically it's that green monstrosity there, and it's a bunch of tubes that basically run inside there that function as a condenser. Main steam line is that second picture. We have basically it's insulated with asbestos. We want to get that off and put non-asbestos material on there. A cooling water system right now, again, that's a project that has been in the budget. And we're just continuing that. The next one I'm really excited about. Sorry. All right. We're looking at an exciter replacement for Unit 7. Again, this is a project that has been in there. The next one is electrostatic precipitator enclosure. That's the third picture there. So electrostatic precipitator is the device that basically, as you take out the burning of our fuel, the hot air passes through that, and that's how we pull out any particulates in the air. And up above, it's basically corrugated metal and things like that. We've been using plastic down below to keep as much heat in and keep the weather out. And with burning of RDF with natural gas, we're finding that at least in the wintertime, we're getting gunking because we have more moisture that we're providing in there. And if we can finally close that system off and keep it heated, the electrostatic precipitator and the ash handling system will function much, much better. And then the last thing that's on there is the boiler tube repair. That's on page 43. That is the larger cost item on Unit 7. In fact, bids are due back on Unit 7 tomorrow. So we should have bids coming back on what that will end up doing.
Don, is that once we're done with this, are we done with all the boiler tubes in 7? Or is this just one of many, many years still coming down the pipe?
Our goal with this Inconel coated boiler tube is, I want to say, I'll never say we're all done, but I don't want to be coming back to you with big dollar items like this again. That's why we're going to that Inconel to protect the tubes. The first set of tubes that I showed you, that wear took place in about 4 years. And we want to extend the life of these tubes with the Inconel coating to 10 to 15 to maybe even 20 years.
So one of those sections is pretty thin on the side. So how thick is the Inconel to make sure that it's not going to so you don't have leaking or whatever?
The Inconel, I want to say, is 0.005 inches. It's not very thick. If you actually look at the side of that tube, you can actually, what Inconel does, especially with a laser overlay, the metal literally, it doesn't just bond to it, it kind of fuses into it. And so the thickness is not as important as how it's connected. If it was just welded to it and it chips off, we lose a lot of the effectiveness. So this will literally let the two metals join, for a small thickness.
Is there still a risk, though, of in the thin spots of those still bursting because of the fact you have so much that you've lost so much thickness in the metal? It's very, very thin coating. Does that make sense? I mean, some of those are, your example, some of it's pretty thin.
Yep. And none of that had Inconel coating on it.
Right.
But
I understand that. But saying that if we're just putting a very, very thin coating over it, is there a risk that you're going to have blowout in the future because you're not strengthening the pipe from an expansion standpoint, but you are protecting it from a corrosion standpoint, right?
Correct. And it's the corrosion that's making it that thin. So I think in answer to your question, yeah, especially if it's laser installed that way, we don't think that we're going to have the same problems that we have today with the uncoated. Because what's happening is as the ash from burning RDF goes there, before when we had coal, the coal ash would actually absorb some of the chlorines and things like that. We don't have that anymore, and we're adding moisture to it. So that ash is coming and it's literally clinging to the pipe, and chlorine actually serves as an acid, and it's just literally sitting there eating the pipe. By having that other coating on there, it's impervious to that same acid attack.
So we're actually replacing the tubes and then coating those with the Inconel.
We're actually going to buy Inconel coated tubes to
Okay.
put in there. We're going to have it factory installed.
So it is all new tubing.
Yes, sir.
I misunderstood. I thought you were just coating the existing tubes.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. No,
All right.
we're buying brand new tubes
Okay.
with Inconel applied at the factory. Sorry. Thank you for the clarification.
And is this for the whole 9 stories?
9 stories is unit 8. This is unit 7. There are areas that we don't have to protect because when we've looked at it, we've never seen attack. But for the majority of unit 7, it will have superheat. Will definitely have it, and most of the water wall tubes will have Inconel coating.
So we should be done with 7, having to do these huge projects and having the boiler go down and the whole
Yes.
9 yards. I know there's nothing guaranteed, but just the point is that
The unit will be in much, much, much better shape than it is today. Moving on to unit 8.
Before we leave that, when you sent around the show and tell items, and we saw the one that had been degraded so much, you said that was over 4 years?
About 4 years, yes, sir.
About-
Let me go a little bit deeper in that. So in the superheats in unit 8, because that's
superheat? I don't know.
okay. So in a never have a whiteboard in here. Within the boiler, you've got the water wall tubes. Okay, as you get up to the top, there are basically, I think, 22 loops, actually more than that are up in the superheat section. So you're heating the water into steam up here, then it goes into the superheat section where it's basically superheated. So these are the loops. I don't have a good picture of a power plant. I can bring one in when we come in to talk to the council about awarding contract. I'll make sure that we've got pictures on that. But so it's within the superheat section that historically has not had a problem when we were on coal. So my point being is, since the 1980s, since we ran Unit 8 and we ran it on coal, we never really had a problem up there. We then switched to natural gas, and I'm not saying natural gas was the problem, but we no longer had coal ash to absorb that. So we're starting to see more and more wear on those tubes.
And so my question is, the tube that was highly degraded that we saw, that was a tube that was degraded in that way after the switch to natural gas. Is that true? Or is this something that happened previously as well, just on a slower scale?
I think it's always worn, but it's becoming quicker and more prevalent because we no longer have coal ash up there, if you want to say protecting the tubes. So it's advancing more quickly.
Okay,
than
and
it
so
was
that
under coal.
so that particular example, we're not sure whether it's the prior to the switch or not.
Correct, because
Okay.
we never measured the tube thicknesses up there. We weren't getting tube ruptures up in that till after we switched to natural gas.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay. In Unit 8, so what we're looking at in Unit 8, we've already replaced the water wall tubes on the side with Unit 8. Superheat tubes is where we're going to be focusing on in Unit 8. We're going to first do Unit 7, and that's why we've got bids out coming back. We're going to start Unit 7 as soon as we select a contractor. Once 7 is done, then we're going to bring 7 up online. It then will become our primary RDF burner, and then we can go back in and work on 8 and get 8 superheat more healthy. Precipitator reconstruction, I bet you I didn't put a good picture in that, but basically on the precipitator for Unit 8, again, it's corrugated metal. There are places where it started to let go, and we do not want it to become a danger where a panel lets go. And so we're looking at doing that work basically immediately. When we talked about it at Probe, we said, go in and get it done right now. So we're working on that. And then turbine generator overhaul, typically every 5 years, we go in and open up the turbine itself, look at the blades, and basically do an overhaul. If there are blades that need to be finished again or replaced, we'll go in there and do that. And then a new one, which is the stack exterior. The good news is this one in here, we actually found a lower cost, but the stack itself on Unit 8 is starting to rust and things like that, and we want to get in there, clean that up, paint it, and get it back up to good shape. So that's the units themselves. Unit 8 is our largest and our newest unit. There are some infrastructure things that we also want to focus on. We got plant relaying and controls. Again, we've got some 1980s equipment in there, so we want to start upgrading that type of stuff. Plant building modifications. This is again something that's been in the CIP for a few years. We've started doing some of the work. If you've gone by the plant, we've got some new windows in there. Got rid of those big old thick glass windows that leak, and we're getting ready to put building security in there that's going to match what's going to go into City Hall and other buildings around here. Fire protection is a long-term project where every couple of years we're looking at, which system do we protect next? And we've still got some projects that we need to do in the outer years for Unit 7 and Unit 8 just to protect it from any kind of known fire. On the fuel waste system, ash pond modifications, this is an interesting one. EPA is coming up with some interesting rules on what needs and can be done and should be done at the ash pond. So we currently have about $2 million in there. We're working with a consultant and others to determine exactly what needs to be done down there long term. So that one's going to be changing in the years to come, exactly what ultimately needs to be done to meet new EPA guidelines. Fuel oil tank removal. The good news is we don't burn fuel oil at Unit 7 and Unit 8 anymore. It's all natural gas, even to light off. So we have a couple of old tanks that sit down in our old coal yard. You could leave them in there, but empty tanks tend to float to the surface, interestingly enough. So we'd eventually like to get in there and remove those. So we've got a project in there in the next couple of years to remove those. Wastewater treatment's another thing. We have an NPDES permit that we maintain. If we can come up with a different way to handle our wastewater, we have a way to get out from underneath an NPDES permit, and we think there's a couple of good opportunities to take care of that in the later years. The coal yard itself, we want to reclaim that. Right now there's some grass growing on it, but we want to find a good long-term way of stabilizing the ground, probably put some grass and other things in there and do that. And then from an other standpoint, a new project is we have a maintenance management software package. Basically, this allows us to track all of the equipment in the power plant. Our current system is somewhat old and dated, so we want to get a new maintenance management program in place so that we can continue to maintain all of our equipment as best as we can. And then long-term removing of Unit 5 and 6 boiler removal is something we're looking at. As we begin to study the idea of burning RDF differently, the likely place or one of the likely places to put that furnace, if you will be where one of the old boilers is. If you haven't been in the plant for a while, we still have Units 5 and 6, both the boiler and the turbine still sitting there. And it actually costs money to remove, so we've just left it there since they were shut down, I think, in the 70s. But by removing them, that gives us space to potentially put in something new to burn refuse dry fuel. And with that, all right, I'll go through all right, key points. So, well, I was just going to, nope.
Which one, Don?
All right, that one. That one's good. That one's great. So all I was going to say was, so from a fiscal year 1920 standpoint, we have a budget of $16 million just in that 1 year. And then the power plant itself represents 75% of our capital budget. So now we can go to the last one here. So some of the key points. So the budget going forward, at least this next year, is focusing on the capital resources towards power plant improvements. We want to increase the reliability of our units, primarily boiler tubes, but other things. We're continuing to be proactive on replacing old and outdated equipment. A lot of those electromechanical switches and things like that, we want to get replaced with good solid state stuff. With the reliability work that we're doing on the distribution system, we want to strive to shorten electric outages. The stuff that we're doing at Tappahallo will greatly improve that, and eventually the stuff at Ontario. And then obviously improving the boiler or the power plant boiler tube life will continue to allow us to maintain our capability of burning RDF well into the future. Are there any questions?
Now, I know you're going to ask us what happened to demand side management. Since this exception for that concept, we placed that project under the capital improvements plan, 1.2 million a year. Recently, we discussed whether that really is a definition of a capital improvement, which I talked about was bricks and mortar. If you think about it, it's really a grant program or a rebate program. So we've taken it out of the CIP, but you will see it in our operating budget. It's just shifted out. It's truly not a capital improvement. We wanted to highlight it in the initial years so you know it's there, but you'll see it in the operating budget. So it's there. It's just been shifted out of the CIP into the operating budget.
Don, you have done a tremendous job of creating protections for the community. One topic I'd like to bring up was highlighted because of a large Wall Street Journal article last week about the security of the grid. And there was a major hacking issue affecting a number of states, including Iowa. So we now have to have conversations that we wouldn't have had 20 years ago, obviously. Without going into too much detail, can you speak to the issue of the degree to which our power system is employing best practices with respect to security?
Yep. What you're referring to specifically is cybersecurity, and it's not only affecting the electric utility, but it affects other utilities. I know Chief Sycash talks about that quite a bit too when we've been in our ELT meetings and things like that. A couple of the pluses that we're doing that really help out the city of Ames is, one, by having all of the capability to generate all of our power here in Ames. If something were to attack the grid itself and take those lines down, we can sustain electric supply here at the city. As long as natural gas is flowing, we have enough generation to meet all of our peak demands. So that's a good thing. We maintain a closed system. We have our own fiber network that we actually don't even share with the city. The only people that can get on that is the electric system itself that we have, that we use to maintain that. We do nothing where I shouldn't say nothing, but there are very little times when we import information. We're always pushing information out. So when you go to our website and things like that, there's nothing that allows anybody to access in. We're pushing the data outside of our network, and it's being displayed on a website. So even if you can get to the City of Ames website, you cannot get into the system that controls, monitors, maintains any of the control systems. So that at a high level, those are a lot of the things that we try to do so that people don't have access.
And maybe David has a greater level of expertise in this. Those things all sound very good to me, but I don't have the capacity to meaningfully understand whether those things are sufficient. Do we work with any kind of consulting firm that looks over our system and gives us a grade and makes recommendations?
One of the things that IAMU, Iowa Association of Municipal Utilities, has recently started offering is that they have a subject matter expert that's on that deals with cybersecurity. And we have actually had some conversation with him, both from within the plant, and I believe he's also talked to some of our IT people at one point in time about doing some kind of an assessment. You can go even farther, hire a consultant that will attempt to try to break in and share with you lessons learned and things like that. We have not gone to that step yet.
So is that something that as a council we would initiate, or you would evaluate its merit and make a recommendation to the council? How does that happen?
I guess from my standpoint, this is something that we're continuing to look at. I think if we needed something like that, we would talk about it, put it in our budget, and then come to council for approval of something like that.
I certainly don't want to micromanage those kind of things, but from a stewardship perspective, the community should have an expectation that we're taking reasonable steps to safeguard our system. And I don't know whether that's something that as a council we need to initiate. I want to have a level of trust that if you thought that certain levels of expertise or test driving the system was warranted, that you'd come to us. But at least for this council member, and I'm sure I speak for everybody, that we're obviously very concerned. You read these articles and you ask naturally, are there implications for us? I mean, our city got hacked not that long ago. So this is all coming a bit close to home. I just want to make sure that this kind of investment in our infrastructure is protected.
Thank you.
Will these projects affect the electric rate that we'll be charging, Don?
Very good question. One of the things that we do, and Dwayne probably has more thoughts on it, but we look at a 5-year projection and see where our balance is. And at this time, with the projections on income and expenses, we do not see a need for a rate increase in the next 4 years, 5 years, Dwayne?
We don't have one in the 5-year plan we have right now. Now, when you get out to year 5, the numbers are obviously less sure. So, there could be some possibility out there, but certainly in the near term, we don't see any rate increase for electric. And he also, in electric, you have the advantage or disadvantage, whatever you want to call it, of the energy cost adjustment. So that is one of the largest portions of the electric budget, and that will move up and down as those costs go up. So that kind of protects us from a rate increase.
Okay. Let's move on to.
Thank you, Don.
Thanks, Don.
We're looking forward to not having to talk about boiler tubes in the future. I can guarantee you that. So,
Speak for yourself, John.
oh, if you enjoy talking about it, more power
Get
to
into
you.
water utility. Thanks, next. John's.
Everybody's here.
Good evening. Before I start, I want to introduce a couple of the folks who actually turn all of these words into physical projects for us. Christina Murphy is our Assistant Director. Chris Evans is one of our 2 environmental engineers on staff. Dustin Albrecht is our Environmental Specialist. And not with us tonight, I don't think, is Leo Weiss, one of our environmental engineers also. So they're the ones on a day-to-day basis that make this happen, not me. So I'm going to start first with the water plant. Page 48 is the summary. First project appears on page 50. This is our advanced metering infrastructure project. You've seen this for a number of years. The new addition this year is that you see a blank year at the end there. We've got about 4 years left. As we're moving through this project, so far we're running just a little ahead of schedule and just a little below budget, which is exactly what I would hope to have happen. Page 51 is a collection of smaller projects that don't warrant their own standalone page. We call it a facility improvements project. In the first year of that, there is money that is set aside for the plant control, the SCADA systems, and the plant security systems in anticipation of, after having lived there for 2 years, that we were going to find a couple of things that we felt needed to be tweaked in how those systems operated. We also are including money for a distributed antenna system that will go into the facility that will transmit cell phone signals and also the public safety radio capacity down into the interior of the facility for employee safety, emergency response safety, and also the ability for maintenance staff, for example, if they're in the basement working on something and need to contact a vendor, they can get a phone signal out of the basement. 52 is the demolition of the old water treatment plant. We are going to be removing the treatment structures there, not removing the 2-story technical services complex. That's the home of the water meter division and the laboratory services division. That building is going to remain. The one change that we've made from when you saw this last year is we now show the expenses being split over 2 years, just in anticipation that the work won't all occur in one fiscal year.
What will you do with the space when those are removed?
Our intent for now is just to return it to a green space. There's no immediate plans for the site. We just made a commitment to the neighbors early on that we weren't going to let the site just sit there and deteriorate and become an eyesore and a hazard. We want to get it taken down as quickly as we can.
And for the building that's going to remain after the demolition, is there anything special about the construction of that building, or is it just a perfectly good building that we might as well use?
Yeah, it's about 25 years old. It's still in really good shape. There was just no reason to spend the money to move that or replace that facility.
I like this picture.
It's about a 1950s vintage shot of it.
Yeah.
It's from when Fifth Street still went past the facility there.
And your construction costs include any modifications to the structure to remain in terms of exterior wall construction modifications,
Yeah,
that kind of
parking
stuff?
modifications. It also includes, there's some
Utility.
active piping that still goes through the old facility that we'll have to make some adjustments to as well. Page 53 is a wellhead rehabilitation project. You saw this last year. The difference is we are adding another 50,000 in the first year of the CIP now so that we can do some antenna replacements. We've had some issues with some intermittent communication failures. And so working with some specialized vendors, seems like now's the time while we're doing controls work on the wells that we should go ahead and update the antennas as well. So we've added a little bit of money in the first year to do that. Page 54 is the addition of a standby generator to power some of the wells in the Hunziker Youth Sports Complex. This was an item that we identified as a part of our emergency response plan that we were required by federal law to generate as a result of the Bioterrorism Act of 2002. As we've worked through other items on that list, this is now the next item that was in our priority list. That original act required us to look specifically at intentional terrorist types of actions for the utility. Very quietly at the end of the last calendar year, Congress passed the America's Water Infrastructure Act. And in a whole bunch of changes to the Safe Drinking Water Act, there's now a requirement for utilities to conduct an all hazard assessment. So really the goal is to try to get utilities to start looking at things like tornadoes, hurricanes, fires, those types of things. And so I'm certain that standby power will continue to be a high priority as we move through that next assessment as well. 55 is our lime sludge lagoon improvements. In order to manage that lime sludge product as efficiently as possible, we need to have adequate dewatering so that we're not paying to haul off water, and we need to have sufficient storage capacity. And we've got elements that address both of those in the next 5 years. The first project is going to rebuild the under drains in the existing cells. And then you see money in there for design and then construction of a new cell. It's actually not expanding the footprint, but going into the interior of a large cell that's not usable the way it's configured now, putting in new berms and establishing a better dewatering system in that cell. 56 is some improvements to the technical services complex, that two-story building we were just talking about. Once the water plant comes down in the space immediately adjacent to the TSC, we're looking to add some vehicle storage, some at-grade heated storage for the laboratory division, and then also adding an elevator onto that building. As long as the water plant's right there, there was a ramp that you could drive up to and get to the second floor of that building. That option will go away as the plant comes down. Page 57 will be an extension of the plant control system out into the distribution system. It'll give us a better, a more in-depth look at what's actually happening in real time in the distribution system. It'll allow us to track some limited water quality parameters. The big thing is really going to be tracking pressure. That's one of the main things that we're wanting to get. Systems are becoming intelligent enough that now if a main break happens and there's a pressure wave that goes out in the distribution system, by triangulating between multiple sensors, it can help us narrow into where the main break was. So that'll hopefully allow us to get earlier notification, quicker responses out. And if a boil water advisory is needed because of a main break, it gives us the data to be able to delineate exactly where that area is. so that everybody who needs to be advised is, and people who don't need to have that disruption don't unnecessarily get included in the boil water advisory. Page 58 is some, I'll call it placeholder money for an elevated tank in the East Industrial Park. We know that at some point in time, we are going to need a tank there to manage pressures and to provide the fire flows. The timing, however, is what we don't know. It's really going to depend on what the type of development is and where it happens first. If it happens more on the west side, closer to the existing infrastructure, we may not need an elevated tank. But if we get an industry way out on the west edge, particularly one that may have some firefighting concerns, then we'll probably have to move quicker. But this is the expected cost to construct that elevated tank.
So we've talked before about the types of industries that might locate out there and the amount of water they would use and how that would affect plant capacity. And I don't know, this is long down the road, but is there any chance that we'd have even more expansion out there that would require, or like a 1.5 million gallon tank or 2 million gallon, just thinking that sometimes the base cost is about the same. You just get, a bigger tank. Is that, how do you arrive at the 1 million gallon tank to come up with what's best to serve that area and provide for the needs?
Yeah, a 1 million gallon tank is really kind of an industry standard.
Okay.
And it's based on really the fire flow volume more than it is on the water demand by the industry itself.
Okay.
So that's really what would drive it. Now, if we were to have an industry that had some sort of an exceptional firefighting demand, that may cause us to rethink it. But when you get to larger tanks, you start getting issues in being able to turn the water volume over to keep a chlorine residual in the water. So there's a line that we try to walk there as well.
What's interesting, so really the size of the tank doesn't really, it's really the pressure in the water lines themselves versus being for the capacity versus drawing the water out of the tank. Is that correct?
Right. Yeah. The elevation of the water is what drives the pressure, not how much water is up there.
Okay.
Whether it's 1 million gallons or 2 million gallons, it's going to be the elevation of the water that's going to drive the pressure.
This is strictly just to maintain a high level of pressure for your wet sprinkler systems, then essentially in buildings. Is that right? And also
Right.
in your main lines.
Right. Yeah. By having that elevated tank, it helps to anchor that pressure out
I
on
see.
the
Okay.
extents of the distribution system. Page 59 is some improvements to the pump station that's located at State and Mortensen, right at the base of that water tower there. When that tank was constructed, it was constructed to accommodate 4 pumps, but only 3 were initially installed because there wasn't enough demand in that west pressure zone. But as we are tracking the growth and the number of hours in a day or a week that we have pumps doubled up in that pump station, it looks like it's time for us to start planning to add the 4th pump that was ultimately envisioned to go there. And that's it for the drinking water side. So I'll just keep moving right straight ahead into the water pollution control facility. The first project there is on page 61. Again, this is kind of an assortment of smaller projects. You can see, like, for example, a grain bin in the first year, and also the construction of a new sampling station at the raw water pump station is what we have envisioned for the first year of the project. Page 62 is what's going to become a multi-year renovation of the raw water pump station process equipment. Most of what's in this facility is still original. It's 29 plus years old now, and we're starting to see that it's really showing its age. And so we are proposing a multi-year project to completely renovate that. So that the money is actually spread over a couple of years. You don't see it all in this 5 years because there's another year, essentially year 6, where the construction of these modifications would complete. Page 63 is our new project, watershed-based nutrient reduction project. You might recall we talked to you about this in November when we were here in a workshop format. At that time, we had proposed $100,000 per year. Based on some of the feedback we received from you and also some of the public comments that were offered suggesting that maybe more money even should be dedicated to this purpose, we've now increased that to $200,000 per year. And so again, this would be looking at projects outside the water pollution control facility in the watershed, looking for projects that have a nutrient reduction function, but that also provide other ancillary benefits. So maybe it's providing recreational opportunities, maybe it's flood control, maybe it's drinking water source protection. But we're looking for opportunities where we can get as many of those other benefits in addition to nutrients as well, so that we kind of maximize the bang for the buck that we're getting here. And we also hope that for a lot of the types of projects that we would go after, that there might be some grant eligibility for it so that we can use our money as a local match and leverage that to get even bigger, more beneficial projects to come out of it.
Would those projects be limited to Story County, or how would you go about determining the location of those?
Yeah, we would work with Story County. We would work with the Squaw Creek Watershed Management Authority, the Prairie Rivers folks that are there. Those are the folks that we would be partnering with, as well as also working closely with Public Works, and John and Tracy and their staff looking for opportunities inside the city limits. Page 64 is another multi-year project that we're really coming in the home stretch. Most of the heavy structural repairs to the digester complex are in the works right now in the current year. What you see in the CIP would be a project that would replace 3 waste activated sludge pumps in the facility. Page 65 is the cogeneration system maintenance project. This is following up on a council workshop that we had a little over a year ago. I think it was maybe October of 2017. So we're following the plan that council directed at that night. In the current year, we're replacing a small engine with a new dual fuel boiler, replacing the controls and the switchgear in that pump station. And then in fiscal year 22-23, we would replace methane generator number 2, which is the unit that's pictured there. We would also add gas conditioning before the gas is burned in the engines to try to increase the life of those engines and reduce the maintenance cost on it. And also modify the grease receiving station to make it easier and more friendly for haulers to be able to dispose of grease at the facility. Page 19 is the nutrient reduction modifications inside the treatment facility. The goal, as we explained it to you back in November, is to try to meet the goals of the Iowa Nutrient Reduction Strategy over the course of 20 years with making modifications to the facility that would happen in 3 discrete phases spread over that 20 years. That plan lets us maximize the remaining useful life of the infrastructure we've got while still continuing to make progressive progress towards meeting the goals of the Iowa Nutrient Reduction Strategy. One of the other pluses that I think came out of this concept that our consultants at HDR gave us is by going at this in smaller discrete phases, it gives us a unique opportunity over the next 20 years to address capacity issues at the facility in smaller bites. Every time we do another phase, we can adjust the capacity as needed. So we don't have to sit here today and try to guess 20 years from now what the demand's going to be, try to guess what's going to come in the East Industrial Park. We get a chance to take little bites at it, which is really a pretty unique thing for a facility like this to have that option. And then lastly, probably the least exciting project is every 5-year routine maintenance of all the switchgear in the facility. We come in, we hit them with infrared cameras, look for hot spots, failing insulation, loose connections, get them cleaned out, vacuum out the dust, clean out any cobwebs, just make sure that we are maximizing the life of the switchgear and also maximizing the life of our employees by making sure that that equipment is as safe as it can possibly be. So that is our plan for the next 5 years. Any questions? I'd be glad to answer them for you.
Good job.
All right, thank
Do
you.
you have the same, Tim, do you have the same question for John as you do for Don in terms of safety? Is there any, when I see all these antennas, I presume is that wireless antennas? Is that correct?
Yeah, we operate on a licensed radio frequency for communication with the wells. I was thinking as you were posing that question to Don about what the same answer would be for us, and I think a lot of it is pretty similar. We have multiple firewalls that protect the control system from people getting in from the outside. The access control, the ability to get physically into the control room is also a measure that we have in place. You've got to get through locked doors before you can get in there. Outside the treatment portion of the facility, the access is locked down to read only. So for me, sitting in my office, actually, I don't even have this capability yet, but it's coming in the very near future. I have read-only access so I can view the screens, but I can't start or stop pumps or do anything in our facility. And then as a last fail-safe, we do have the issue to completely unplug the facility and run it in a completely manual mode. It will be, I think, a little more difficult now with the new facility than what it was at the old one, but we do still have that capability. And we've had to do it a couple times when the control systems have gone down unexpectedly, and we've had to manage the plant in a purely manual mode.
I did wonder about that. The issue too isn't just people being able to access over the web. Again, this is more your area, David, but malware being installed in your software, your system that you wouldn't know about until somebody decides to play with it. So it's a scary world.
It is.
I just want to make sure that you guys are all thinking about that.
Yeah, I've heard of some utilities who have gone so far as to put super glue in the USB ports of their computers so that employees can't inadvertently stick a thumb drive in.
And do you anticipate any, once we get through these CIP projects, are there other large projects that you're anticipating at the water plant or wastewater treatment plant that we're considering after the $40 million project for the nutrient reduction, or there always are going to be big projects coming?
Yeah, there's always going to be projects that are on there. We try to keep actually a 20-year projection of what the capital needs are. Obviously, when you get to years 11 and they're out, it's pretty speculative. But when we present to you the 10-year rate projections that we do, we've got pretty hard projects that are locked in there already. So, like for example, in this CIP, the Headworks project at WPC, that $10 million project, it shows as a new project, but for the last 10 years, as I've been showing you rate projections, that project has been built in there already. So it's not a new add to the rate projections that you've seen.
Appreciate your foresight. Very important.
Now, in terms of rates,
We'll deal with that on the Friday before. We're going to go over all the funds and the rates. We're trying to introduce the projects now, and we'll show how we're going to pay for operations and capital at that time.
Thank you.
thanks, John.
Good evening. As we're kicking off the Public Works portion of our CIP presentation tonight, I just wanted to introduce the division heads that put a lot of work into creating this document. And then, as John said, they're the ones that carry this plan out in the field. So I want to introduce Tracy Warner with engineering, Damian Pragetzer, traffic, Justin Clausen, operations, and Bill Schmidt with resource recovery. And as we did last year for the first time, we want to start out with just a very brief video recap of some work that we accomplished last summer. So thanks to Derek Chrysler and the Channel 12 staff for all the hard work they did in putting that together and the great work they always do. Also wanted to thank McKinley Ritter and administration. She put a lot of work into this as well and wasn't able to be here tonight. So as we get started in the utilities program, we begin with water distribution. The water system improvements on page 69, that's our annual program that's generally focused on replacing the 4-inch water mains. We make every effort to coordinate that work with street work that's also programmed in the CIP. The other program under water distribution is the Campustown Public Improvements. That's the 100 block of Welch improvements that council saw earlier this winter. Here's as a reminder, the cross-section that was chosen by council. WHKS was selected as the consultant for this work, and they had their kickoff meeting this week. So they're hitting the ground running on this project. Then next in utilities, we move into sanitary sewer. The Clearwater Diversion Program, that's an annual program that we have that installs collector lines that generally serve to collect sump pump discharge throughout the community. You'll see in the first year, we've doubled what is our typical annual budget for that. With all the rains that we received last summer, we got a number of requests and inquiries and comments. So we've doubled that budget for this coming year. Then we have our sanitary sewer system improvements. We're continuing our system-wide upgrades. This shows what the lining operation looks like. That's been a major focus and will continue to be. Next, we move into the stormwater section of utilities. Some locations that will be accomplishing work through our various programs. Under low point drainage will be in the top of Hollow area, 28th Street and Kennedy. You'll see at the very bottom there are flood mitigation, river flooding. In the second year, we've got our money programmed in anticipation of being successful with the FEMA grant. So if we are to be successful with that, that money will be available in federal fiscal year 20. So that wouldn't be until late fall next year, which is why we have that work programmed in our fiscal year 2021. Also under the stormwater program, we have our erosion control program. We'll be doing bank stabilization in the Brookside Park area at various locations. Under our facility rehab program on page 79, this is the Bloomington Heights West Townhomes. A lot of times these developments, the broader area facilities, especially in the residential developments, are the city's long-term maintenance responsibilities. In industrial areas, especially, and sometimes commercial areas, the long-term maintenance responsibilities generally lie with the properties. Then closing out utilities, we have resource recovery. This is our annual kind of big ticket maintenance item program. So the staff works hard to keep the plant in top running shape and forecasting out what the needs are, the maintenance needs to keep it running as such. Then we move into the transportation program and we begin with streets engineering. One that I wanted to point out is the ISU, excuse me, the ISU Research Park. As you know, we were successful and received our Economic Development Administration grant for this project in the fall. And last week at the DOT Commission meeting, we were awarded the RISE grant for that. Council also saw that application and approved that last week as well. So one of the next few meetings, we'll be receiving the official grant back from DOT and be bringing that back to council for official acceptance. Also, then we have a couple of programs that we just are accomplishing various locations. One is the concrete pavement improvements. Another is our right-of-way restoration program. Then, of course, Grand Avenue is a project that's been in the CIP at kind of the top for the last few years. So on page 89, you'll continue to see that program. We're continuing to work out the arrangements for land acquisition and are hopeful that that will be moving forward in a cooperative manner this spring. Then you can see on the right-hand side some renderings of what that roadway will look like after completion.
John, on the page 89, our page 89 just shows $2 million this year for. Oh, that's right. I'm sorry. I was looking at 18, 19. I was getting confused on the.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then this is a new connection project that's been in the CIP for several years. Finally moving up into the first year in 1920 will be preliminary engineering, environmental analysis, and land acquisition for the Cherry Avenue extension, and then the connections with Southeast 3rd and Southeast 5th. Page 92 is our arterial street improvement program. The program in 1920 is proposed to be 13th Street. That'll be from Wilson to Duff. This work will be coordinated with other work that we're also doing in the area, namely the crossing enhancements at Clark and 13th, also drainage improvements and asphalt street improvements north of Fire Station 1. Page 93 is our Collector Street improvements. 1920 is proposed to be Bloomington Road. So this is the divided boulevard section with a wide grassed median between Hoover and Grand. Page 95 under asphalt street improvements. This is one of the projects I just alluded to that's being coordinated with 13th Street. We'll be doing improvements north of Fire Station 1 on 14th and 15th Streets. Next in transportation, we have shared use paths. Our multimodal roadway improvements will include intersection safety enhancements. One I had mentioned that's being coordinated is our 13th Street and Clark. Another intersection improvement that we'll be making is at South Dakota and Mortensen. So that's to make it easier for bikes and peds to cross those busy streets.
Sorry, Jack, can you go back to 95 just for a second? The asphalt street on Oakwood Road, that's pretty narrow. There's not much of a shoulder and you have quite a bit of ditches. Is there any widening going on there at all? Or is it just going to be basically replacing the street? Because the street is obviously deteriorating on Oakwood Road. It's 2223 Oakwood Road from State to University.
Oh, yep. With that being that far out, we haven't done any preliminary planning, but that would be one thing we would have to consider is the roadway standards for safety. So we'll be considering lane width, shoulder width, or curb and gutter. Those types of things will be taken into account with our preliminary design.
It's not too bad on the south side, but the north side, you go pretty near our shoulder and then it just drops off into a ditch. I was just curious, if you had some kind of an accident or something or ice, you could have cars going into ditches. I was just curious if that was part of the.
Sure, you bet. There'll be clear zone standards that we'll need to meet and slope, things like that.
And now that we have the complete streets philosophy sort of formalized, will that impact some of the improvements that we're doing?
Probably not a local street like this. Generally, those are low volume enough, low speed enough that it's generally a shared facility. But our other streets, we certainly will. So as we move forward in the CIP and the newer projects that are programmed and with the newer funding that's programmed, that's certainly going to be a consideration. And these other streets will run through our methodology and see what kind of improvements associated with that are appropriate to be incorporated in these roadway projects. So under shared use paths, I just mentioned about the intersection improvements we'll be making at 13th and Clark, as well as South Dakota and Mortensen. That was multimodal roadway improvements. Our shared use path expansion includes 2 locations. One is the Skunk River Trail, Lincoln Way to Southeast 16th, and then paving the south portion of the Vet Med Trail. The north portion, north of 16th Street, will be coordinated with Grand Avenue, and you'll see that in, I believe, the following year of the CIP. So this sheet is a summary of our shared use path, our bike, our PED improvements that are associated both standalone and then with other, particularly street projects. So a couple years ago, council mandated that over the 5-year period of the CIP that we average 1.2 million per year on these types of improvements. Over this CIP, we're averaging just over 1.7 million per year. So this sheet summarizes where all those improvements can be found. Then moving into traffic engineering, want to point out the US 69 improvements for the first year will be our share of a DOT maintenance project on Lincoln Way. So Lincoln Way from Duff to Grand is US 69. The DOT will be administering a project, and that's our portion of the improvements that are being made along with that project. Then in the 2021, that will be looking at aligning the eastbound off-ramp from 30 to South Duff with Billy Sunday Road and signalizing that intersection. Also, I want to point out the traffic calming.
Go ahead and play it.
You guys so excited about traffic calming, decided to poke out and polka.
So we have funds program to coordinate with Meeker School. And we'll be coordinating with the principal on making some traffic calming improvements in that area. So the scope and the timing of those improvements will coordinate with the school. The traffic signal location for 1920 would be Lincoln Way and Beach. You can see the cabinet, the outdated electronics and wiring in the cabinet. So the upgrade is greatly needed at this location, especially considering the special events and the special functioning of the traffic signal to keep traffic moving for those events.
I think you can make do with that a few more years.
So project we're looking forward to.
We got an email, and Damien responded to that, and on South 16th and Dayton Road. And is that just all control? Is that all just programming, Damien, in terms of trying to, the complaint was huge backup from 5 to 5:30 at that intersection. That doesn't require any capital improvement. That's just basically controlling. It's just reprogramming. Is that right? Or
well, we're doing a quick study of it, and if there is anything that would require capital improvements that we couldn't adjust with just either timing or maybe changing the head or two, we'll have to bring that back at a future CIP.
Okay.
So that is unknown right now.
Yeah.
Next in transportation, we have street maintenance. Our bridge rehab locations for the 1920 year will be 6th Street over the railroad and Minnesota Avenue over the railroad. So we'll be doing deck improvements there. Also, neighborhood curb The first year is going to be North Franklin. So that'll be Lincoln Way, north to Oakland. Then also in the maintenance program, we have our Main Street Sidewalk Paver Replacement Program. On the left, you can see the deteriorated condition. That's kind of typical along Main Street. On the right, that shows the method that we use to reconstruct the sidewalks west of Clark. So that's poured concrete with color. So that'll be the method we use for replacement. We have funds programmed in the current year, 18-19, to do Clark to Burnett, both sides. And then in 1920, we'll also be doing Kellogg to Douglas on both sides.
That's great.
John, are those brick intersection markers that have like the stone caps, does that fall underneath your responsibility too? Because some of those are really starting to show some, salt damage and deterioration as well too.
They are, yeah. Our operations folks have been coordinating with Parks and Rec to see what we can do on that. We started looking at that last year. We've talked to local vendors about some things that might be able to be done. We'll see what we can accomplish through the operating budget. Anything larger than we'd have to bring back in a future CIP.
Is that under Parks and Rec, or is that underneath your purview, the vertical?
Together on these things.
Pardon me? They work together?
We try to work together, so I don't put it in a certain
Right.
cubbyhole. Everyone works together.
Then continuing in transportation, we have parking. As a placeholder in the 5th year, we've put improvements to the CBD parking lot on the south side of Main Street. So as we continue to build funds, as we continue to evaluate the condition of the various parking lots, this very well could change as that moves up closer in future CIPs. Then rounding out transportation as well as the public works portion of the CIP is our airport program. We're not proposing any first year project under airports. We're continuing with our master plan update. That's going very well. Some improvements that you'll see continuing in the last years of the CIP are electrical vault relocation, demolishing the old terminal, airport apron rehabilitation, and then T-hanger repairs. So as we finish up our master plan, though, some of those might get shifted around. Some might move up in priority. Some might move out. New things might move in. So that master plan will be important as we get that finished. So that concludes our public works portion. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have thought of.
I have a question with respect to resource recovery. On page 82, 83 is where this is covered. And if you were to project out the reasonable life of this system, I mean, we're spending $300,000 pretty consistently year to year. And it seems like in the last few years, we've had some unexpected issues that arise, and they're always expensive. There's nothing cheap that happens there. At some point, does it make sense to start thinking about a new resource recovery plant, given what we're spending in maintenance?
Well, we're very confident in the system and in the plant as we have now, and the improvements that are being made. We're continually making improvements, so we're confident in that. But one thing that you may have seen that or will see, that along with electric in 1920, we've got some funds that are being proposed to do a study. So we would study how we process municipal solid waste, what our end product would be, how that may coordinate best with the electric production, whether that might be a standalone generation unit or what that might be. But we're kind of stepping back and taking a broader look. So exactly what you just said, that is this the best way to do what we're doing? Are there other ways of doing it better, more efficiently, providing a better product? So we're proposing a study in 1920 to take a look at that.
Is part of that study going to look at the location if there was a change in the facility? Because I've just said from the dais here, I'd like to see it moved off Lincoln Way. I think it would
Right, you
Get a
bet.
benefit.
Yep, we'd be looking if there's better locations to do what we do, especially if the study comes back showing that really, a different process is warranted and economically beneficial. If a different way of creating electricity or creating an enhanced product, all those things might lead us to a different location.
With the coal yard being reclaimed, it seems like there may be some other locations that would be available.
Sure.
That's great that there was a study. I didn't know that was happening. So 1920 is when that,
Yeah.
You'll see the operating budget.
great, thank you.
John, it looks like we're doing major projects on 13th Street and Welch both this year. Do we have any concerns about fire stations 1 and 2 both being next to these major projects?
Well, Tracy can correct me if she's got other information about the timing, but the Welch project, I think we're still looking at constructing that this construction season, and then the 13th Street project wouldn't be until next year, so they'd be offset a year.
Steve, this may not be the right time to ask if it's the okay. Progress on Grand Avenue property acquisition, is that better to be talked about at a different time than right now?
Again, because it's in the CIP, as you saw.
It could be nice to, I know that I haven't talked to anybody in the city that isn't excited about this project.
on page 89.
going forward.
89 is the project, and the timing.
Yeah, and staff is continuing to work with the land acquisition. We're waiting on a document that hopes to come in this week or next week that'll continue moving forward with the discussions with the golf course, business operations, and then we continue with some counter offers to a couple of other people. We've had some where we're trying to get temporary easements that say they don't want the sidewalk infill. So we're kind of going back and forth with that conversation. So if need, we'll have to kind of meander the sidewalk within the right of way. But hopefully we can get it negotiated out. So we're continuing. Obviously the bid letting is continuing to get moved back. But we'll just need to look at the completion date in order to, even though the contractor would start later, if they have just as much time to finish it, hopefully we'll still get good bids in.
We're still looking at 2020 for driving down all the way to 16.
We're kind of pushing that tight right now, but hopefully, yeah, probably closer to the end of 2020 at this point. But
So this year, what can the public expect related to that overall project? Is South Fifth going to be extended to the west, or what's going on this year and what might be going on next year then?
right, so we're continuing to do some land acquisition on the fifth piece as well. So we haven't been able to have the bid letting for either the fifth or the grand extension that goes north-south. So once we get those figured out, we'll be able to continue to figure out if it's one big bid letting or if it's two different ones, and they can start on the Fifth Street before. So we're really going to push that. And then the section that is South 16th, South Duff intersection improvements, that'll be able to be a local bid letting. And so it'll move a little quicker. But we're still discussing what that looks like with the DOT as well.
Am I remembering correctly that there was a shift in the potential agreement with Iowa State and that had come into question again?
One of the issues, Mayor and I need to be, we've scheduled a meeting with the president and her staff to talk about a number of issues. That's one of the issues we're going to have. We only need about a half an acre for a permanent easement and a little less than that for a temporary easement on their property that abuts the golf course. So I've submitted a letter to the university asking their response to that. I haven't had an answer, so I think it's something we're going to have to bring up when we meet with the president. We had a meeting scheduled a week ago, and unfortunately, schedules they had to cancel, but I think we're going to reschedule as soon as possible. So we have to deal with that issue.
I just want to make a comment, and that is, I think council got this email, and I'm going to embarrass Justin here for a second, but all of our staff does an excellent job in public service, but we got a tremendously positive email, Justin, and thank you very much for the prompt response. And for those who may not be aware, there's a phone call that came in. They're very frustrated, concerned about safety on 13th Street, I think it is. Anyway, so they're trying to figure out, and finally got a hold of Justin. He jumped right on it. And this, one of the residents here in the community just, I think he thinks Justin walks on water, as long as it's frozen, I think. But anyway, the point is that just kudos, thank you publicly for, doing what you do. I know you all really are concerned about public service, and we get occasional, we don't get very many thank you notes, but I just want to publicly recognize and thank you. And it's just a testament to people being passionate. And the other thing was that he even offered to try and figure out how we can do a better job of when someone calls in, try to make sure that they get to somebody, and it may happen to be on a lunch hour or something like that, and you didn't get to it. But I just think it's just continuous improvement, excellence for people, the whole 9 yards is working, and it just shows people really do appreciate that. So once in a while, you got to say, great job, keep it up. So thanks, Justin.
Nice.
Anything else for John and his team? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
See what I think of Sherry. I'll just get the next one up. Sherry next? Yes. Does she have overhead?
What's that?
Sherry gonna operate?
You're not? No.
Sure.
Well, I'm gonna have to get cozy then. Yeah.
Dwayne has a new toy here he's showing everybody. Actually, it's Derek's, but
Derek's toy, but he lets me.
Derek's like,
I'm going to let Wayne handle that. So, good evening. The transportation section starts on page, if you want to move it forward.
Yeah.
On page 119 with the overview, a couple things that I wanted to just mention to you on these pages is it's about a $13 million capital plan over the 5-year period. But if you look at it, it's really mainly in two different areas, vehicle replacement and then the building expansion and modernization. Those two items in the budget total over 85% of the budget, just in getting vehicles replaced and addressing the facility issues that we currently have. In the short term, there is some technology improvements in there that's a little over $1 million as well. And that's mainly, I think we talked to you at the about a year ago at the CIP about the Annunciator project. And that's the main reason for that short-term cost as well.
Sherry, are those Annunciators going to be able to be moved from older buses into newer buses as we update the fleet?
Yes, they would be. Again, our buses, we usually keep about 18 years old. My guess is the technology may not be what we want to keep in those vehicles. So it's a possibility if it's a new enough equipment, we could move it from bus to bus, but probably we would just buy it with the vehicle. Okay. On page 120, it starts with a vehicle replacement. Again, this is a big piece of the capital budget. This budget does continue reliance on our diesel-powered vehicles, and we do put biodiesel up to 20% in our vehicles, trying to be more fuel efficient and emissions reduction. However, the board is interested at this point in zero-emission electric buses, and we have hired a consultant that is working with staff and the board about how to deploy this. We call it kind of a roadmap to deployment for electric buses in the community. We contracted last fall with that study to be completed by February of this year. What that consultant will be looking at are what routes could these vehicles be adequately and successfully operated on. Again, there's a range issue, so it can't be operated on every route in the community all day long. So operationally, how would this work? What are the impacts, and what percentage of the fleet could handle electric buses? We also want to look at our facilities. Again, make sure that we're accommodating it with the energy requirements with the plug-in vehicles, and then best practices in the industry as well. So we're looking forward to that. Sorry. And where we are at this point, in February, we really have three options. If the consultant comes back and it's not feasible for the community, we obviously will continue with our biodiesel vehicles in the future. However, if they are feasible, we really have two directions that the board could decide to go with this. So first is maybe the slower approach, if you want to think of that, and having a demonstration project where we can actually rent or borrow one of these vehicles from another transit system that is currently operating them, put them on our routes, understand how they work, what operational challenges they have, what benefits they're providing, and then also directly what challenges for the facility itself. Or the board could choose a more aggressive stance on electric vehicles, and there are a couple of grant opportunities in April and May of this year for federal funds that fund up to 90% of the cost of the vehicles and the charging stations. So again, depending on the results of this study, we could be moving quickly or a little bit slower into the possibility of electric buses in the community.
A question before we move on?
Yes.
Are you also considering electric for the administrative vehicles? Seems easier to do.
We do have hybrid vehicles. We have 2 hybrid vehicles currently in the fleet. We have not gone to the zero emission vehicles yet. We could look at that. That's something we could have a discussion with the board on.
I think that'd be great because I see you have 4 vehicles slated over the next 5 years at $30,000 each.
Right.
That's kind of like the consumer price point for electric vehicles at this point. So I think it's worth looking into.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
The next project is facilities on page 121. And our past focus on our facility has been in modernizing the current facility that we have on 6th Street, University Boulevard. As you look at this year's plan, it's a little bit of a different focus where we're looking at expansion over time of our facility in order to kind of right size the facility to the fleet size that we have. If you think about the last 12 years, our ridership, which means our buses, have grown considerably as we have grown with the university. Currently, the problem is we have 18 buses parked outside on a daily basis. As we've worked with consultants and architects, we've learned that our facility is undersized in almost every area of the facility, and we are not able to expand currently where we're at. We're landlocked, and all the adjacent properties next door are not available for us to be able to expand close by. So we're looking at areas within the community or just outside of the Ames city limits in order for us to find a second site, and hopefully over time, that's large enough that over time we could reassemble, if you want to think of it that way, the facility back into one location at the new site. So we're looking for 16 to 18 acres as we're moving forward, either on the west or the south. That's where a majority of our service starts and ends, so that will reduce our operating costs if we can find a site in one of those 2 locations. Push me forward. So currently, again, working with the board, we have narrowed sites in the community down to the top 10. You can kind of see a little bit with the map that I've got there. The sites are on the west side, outside of the city limits, and to the south and right on the fringes or outside of the city limits as well. We hope this spring to be able to analyze the top 5 sites that we've got located on the map, and then select a preferred site. Once we do that, then we'll have to work with the Federal Transit Administration to review that preferred site. They'll be looking at it from an environmental standpoint, historical standpoint, and then just operationally for the SIRIDE as well. Again, there are grant opportunities this spring and summer, 2 different grant that could fund up to 85% of the cost of a new facility. So we could be looking at submitting some grant applications later this spring or summer if the project moves that quickly through the process. Currently, the Transit Board has about $715,000 in local match in order to match a grant for a facility. Plus, they have potential uncommitted closing balance funds that they could also put towards the facility. And then there are some future state grants that could also help as well as we're moving forward on that project.
Are those all ISU properties?
Most of them are. Out of the top 10, I think there are 6, if my memory serves me correct, that are either ISU or ISU Foundation, and then the rest are private property. The next projects are technology improvements on page 122. Again, our focus, near-term focus in the next 2 years is on the automated enunciators. I had hoped to be here today to say they're working great and we're ready to move forward with a full project as we've been doing a demonstration project. However, we're finding glitches with the technology, which is not surprising, and are working with a vendor. Hopefully, we can come to resolution on that. If not, we may be looking at a different type of enunciator system that would work better with our GPS system. So we hopefully in the next 6 months we can get some substantial movement on that direction and be able to begin fully deploying enunciators on all the vehicles. Automated passenger counters are also a project that we've had in the capital plan in the past. Our GPS tracking system is now 6 years old, and a lot of the equipment is no longer supported. And so we're looking at, as we do the enunciators, also looking at how we can use the same technology to update the GPS trackers at the same time, so that there's a kind of a efficiency there. Maintenance software replacement is a new project this year. We've had maintenance software program. It's not a transit-specific program, rather one that's used in just the maintenance industry. So we would like to replace that with a transit-specific software that will allow us to do a little bit more bus-specific trend analysis and things like that could help us manage the maintenance area a little bit better. And then also we will be coordinating with the city's new deployment of a radio system as well. So in the farther term focus, we're looking at some improvements to the building with the Wi-Fi that would allow us to download all of this information from the buses to the office, so more Wi-Fi within the storage area. So as the buses come in and are washed and fueled at night, that information is automatically downloaded to the office so that we can more quickly and efficiently be able to utilize that information. The next project is the bus stop improvements on page 123. The near-term focus is on smaller improvements. Last year, we did a major improvements in our bus stops with the Siray 2.0. We are spending almost $200,000 last year in changes to the bus stops. So this next couple of years, it's really smaller improvements, concrete pads, small sidewalk connections to make more ADA accessibility on some of our older stops. Also, the Iowa DOT has completed an ADA bus stop assessment on the state highways within the community. And we have a long list of what they would like to see us do in order to improve those bus stops as well. So we'll be looking at that and incorporating that into our bus stop improvement program. Also, we're looking at new bus stop design. The bus stop signs that you see there are over 25 years old. So we were thinking of maybe a little fresher look to the new signs, as we're having to replace a majority of them in the community as well. And then the 3 to 5 year focus, again, we'll be looking at more shelters in the community in a 3 to 5 year period and continuing with that DOT improvements. And the last area is the shop and office equipment, page 124. Again, this is a typical item for chair replacement, computer replacements. We're starting to do some stand-up desks, which are very popular at SciRide, and are incorporating about 2 or 3 per year as we move forward. And then some of the smaller shop equipment is listed in your plan, but also some larger equipment with forklifts and air compressors that are around 30 to 35 years old. So. Any questions?
So an interesting data point I looked up while you were chatting. In California, they're required all city buses have to be electric by 2029. Now it's California, they're a more aggressive environmental state, but that's a pretty impressive goal. I hadn't even heard about us looking at this, so I think it's very exciting.
Yeah, there are a lot of cities that are going to 100% electric. Again, as the preliminary discussions we've had with the consultant, it looks like right now with the technology the way it is, with the range limitations that is currently on the technology, at about 25 vehicles is what would seem to make sense to have electric in our current route structure. So I guess I would feel a little uncomfortable in going to 100% with where the technology is today. But I think, 10 years from now, that could be a very different story, and it might be something that would be very beneficial for the community.
Can you share what the price difference is for a diesel bus to electric bus?
Diesel bus is just under 500,000 now. An electric bus is around 900,000, which is about the same price as articulated, the Bindi type buses that we have in the community as well.
But there's also a significant difference in maintenance, I assume. The electric would not require a fraction of the maintenance that the diesel ones would.
Right. It's different because it's
And
a
the fuel
lot,
costs,
it's
so
high
there's a-
voltage electric. So as opposed to a lot of parts and pieces as in the mechanical buses that we currently have. So that is correct. Again, it's early enough in this deployment across the nation.
Sure.
There aren't a lot of experiences. We hear what the manufacturers say, and they say that your maintenance costs will go down. I haven't seen that come through in reports from other transit systems if they have began operating these systems.
Point being is $400,000, 25 buses, that's $10 million more. And procuring it versus maintaining it, there's a different, how you pay for that as well too. So the initial capital outlay, most of our buses have been purchased by getting grants, a matching grant as well too. So
Right.
unless we're going to go out and start paying for all of them ourselves, and trying to budget that, which would be very challenging, I think, to do.
Right.
So I agree that when I was on the transit board, they were touting, how reduced the maintenance was. But the point is that, but you still got to have that first downstroke, which is, so significant.
The one nice part is that the Federal Transit Administration recognizes the benefit of these and is willing to pay a little bit more. So instead of 85% share on a bus, it's 90%, which does help as you try and financially make this make sense.
But they only dole out so much money every year, though. And the point is,
Right.
instead of getting maybe 4 new diesel buses, maybe you get 1 or 2 electric buses.
Right.
And I'm not against it. I'm just saying is that it sounds like, well, let's just go all electric and be done with it. But there's a significant downstroke to it from a standpoint of purchasing them to begin with. 2 is getting electrical service into the building to pay for all to charge all the systems.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of pieces that we have to be, understand.
And that's the exact reason why the board wanted us to hire a consultant and understand it before we got into it.
Sherry, where else in Iowa are they moving to electric fleet?
Des Moines just purchased 6, I believe. I think they get them in this fall. Rock Island, Davenport, they serve both of the communities. Just got 3 in and actually have had them running since March and have 3 more that are coming in within the next year. That's it in Iowa for right now. And then, within the Midwest, there are a lot of other systems that are currently deploying electric buses as well. And again, we're interested in understanding what their challenges are so we can learn from them before we get into this. So we're actually going to be part of a Midwest electric bus. Even though we don't have electric buses, we want to go and listen to what their operations or maintenance folks are saying so that if we do get into this area, we go into it with our eyes open and can maybe avoid some of the pitfalls that they have experienced.
And for a little bit of context, how many buses do we have in the fleet?
93.
Other questions for Sherry? Do you have one, David? You were going to ask? Right.
I do want to actually thank Sherry because
That's
this will
right.
be her last CIP
right.
presentation.
Oh, you'll see me again for the budget.
It's still your last CIP
Yes, it
presentation. So thank you for putting this one together.
Thank you.
Yeah. Congratulations. And thank you.
Joe?
Thank you.
Okay, they're going to move into community enrichment and parks and recreation. Keith?
Good evening. And so just before we get started with the slide, just wanted to say that as we go through this tonight, one of the things that we did is we have had some unexpected projects come up, and I'll kind of point those out to you. Bridge in McCarthy Lee, fishing pier out at Ada Hayden, things that we weren't expecting. So really with this year's focus and having conversation with Parks and Recreation Commission, we really tried to take care of those projects that need to be done, which wound up delaying a number of other projects. And you'll see that kind of as we go through this. So just the front picture there is the new Whibbit obstacle course and the Wiggle Bridge, very popular. And that was purchased prior to last year's season starting. So on page 132, you have the park system improvements. Not going to go through each one of those, but at Emma McCarthy Lee, you can see the picture on the left. What's left there is the approach to the bridge. The main part of the bridge is washed out. And what we're looking at is to replace that. And you can see the location on the right side there. But we're talking about $250,000 for that. Now, we are working with FEMA from this storm event. There may be some money that we get from FEMA, but right now we've submitted all the paperwork and have not heard back from them. This is one on the left is railings on our stairs that come from Ridgewood down to the tennis courts at Brookside. And then on the right is the stairs that come from the tennis courts down towards the bridge that crosses Squaw Creek. So this one is just getting railings put on, create a safer environment. This golf course, this is in there, a couple pictures in regards to erosion. We have met with some disc golf enthusiasts. And one of the things also is last year we had to take a bridge out. You can see on the right side of that picture, we took out a bridge and we were contemplating whether we should replace it or not. After meeting with the disc golfers, the enthusiasts, what they suggested is why don't we just not replace that bridge and reconfigure the course a little bit. So this is how, we would reconfigure, because right now, if you look right here is about where hole number 7 is, and then hole number 8 goes like this. So it was really convenient for the bridge to be used. But with this bridge being gone, we can reconfigure that everything south of the creek and not have to replace that bridge. So that's something that we're going to be doing with these funds as well. Okay, spray pad. We did delay this just 1 year. But again, this is something that there's a lot of excitement within the community. You can see there's a lot of options that we can do, make it colorful, not colorful. But starting here in the spring, we'll start having conversation with the public in regards to locations. We as staff have already gone through and kind of identified what maybe some better locations. Now we'll get feedback from the citizens. Years 3 and 4, that shows some of those. One of the things in there is consolidate the maintenance facilities. So you do see that we do have right now, this is our kind of our main shop right here. We have old shop right here, which is in the floodplain. And then we have the cemetery, which some of the buildings up there at cemetery are getting to a point where they need to be replaced. So what we'd like to do is get rid of this, and then just put everything right there at one place. It would be helpful for all of our staff to be together, all the equipment together, and so on. So that's what this one is for. River Valley Park, Cottonwood Shelter, and there's a couple of things regarding this. You can see where the Lowhead Dam project. We feel that this is going to be a very popular destination, not only for Ames residents, but outside of the area. So we've got a couple of things we'd like to do is actually redo the parking here somewhere. But what we want to do then is put a shelter on the other side of the parking, because eventually in a long range plan that we've had discussions with the maintenance facility gone, we'd actually maybe bring a road through there and we'd have another entrance to River Valley. So where we come in from the old shop, because right now, anytime you go into River Valley, you have to turn around and go back out. There is no drive through in there. So that's some of the things that we'd like to do with that area. And then year 5 is just a few other items there. Playground equipment. what we did is, you'll see, in all 5 years, a number of different playground pieces. And what we did is we really took Joshua Thompson, our Parks and Facilities Superintendent, looked at all of our playground equipment, put together a really nice chart with when does it need to be replaced, what do we need to do with it. We've been going with the concrete borders around, which has been really nice. Accessibility is a lot better. But one of the things that we're looking at is the picture on the left is really what a lot of our composite structures, look like. That's what they do. The right picture is a composite structure, but obviously has a lot more character. And what we want to try to do as we're replacing playground equipment, can we do things to make some of our neighborhood parks a little bit more, not only service the neighborhood, but it could be a destination, and definitely want to do something different in our community parks where we have multiple playground pieces. These are just some examples of more natural, looking, type of thing. And then the last one is just a few climbers. Again, instead of putting all composite structures back into the system, get some variety, and again, make some destinations, get people to some parks that maybe aren't as used as much as some of the others. Edwards Park development right now, this is an old picture, an old aerial. The building is gone. Right now, the school district is, they have taken the fence off on the west side. So up here, they've taken some trees out. Now they just have to do some grading. They have to bring some soil in to fill some low spots. But, and they have taken care of this issue over here. If you remember, the fence that they had was not the property line. The property line was actually south of that fence. So they got that taken care of. So what it looks like now is a couple of pictures. That first picture is looking from the northeast, kind of to the southwest, and you can see the playground equipment a little bit further in the back. And then the picture on the right is standing kind of almost in the middle of the property, looking to the south, with the playground. So you see a lot of trees, and just talked with one of the neighborhood reps the other day. Probably in February, we'll be having a meeting to solicit information and start putting a master plan together to what we do with Edwards. Ada Hayden, the wetland overlook, that's in year 22, 23, but the accessible fishing pier, kind of see here a couple of different pictures. You can see it on the whole thing on the top picture, but on the right, if you can kind of see what's happened is we're getting these waves, in there, and in these spots, there used to be some of those limestone blocks that were set in there. And what has happened is in some locations, some of the stuff has been sinking, some has been heaving, and it's kind of cantilevered also. So what happens is anything that's been sinking has been bringing the water side part of that pier up. So in some cases, we have 5 to 6 inch difference in some of the decking. So this is one that we want to take care of before it gets too bad. Municipal pool, we just, again, $25,000 per year. School district does the same, to do anything. And right now, we're extending that through, 22, fiscal year 21, 22. ADA transition plan, working with Tashik to get the inventory assessment RFP out. That should be going here very soon. And then we'll develop a transition plan and address, any compliance issues that we have. Now we put a water fountain and a grill here, but there's a lot of other things associated: doorways, height of sinks, all that kind of stuff. They'll come in and tell us what we need to do. Ames ISU Ice Arena, that parking lot, it's about almost, they're coming up on 20 years, and it's getting to a point where we need to do some work on that. So we'll redo it and hopefully get another 20 years out of that. Homewood Golf Course, part of the golf course clubhouse. We'll need to do some shared use paths, either along Duff, 20th Street, and we're having some conversation that will come before you another time in regards to do we need to do 20th Street? Do we just do Duff Avenue? We do need to do a sidewalk from the clubhouse out to 20th Street. There already is a sidewalk on the south side of 20th Street. But those are some money in there for that, and then replace the bridge on hole number 9. But this next slide is one at the first public viewing of this. So right now we're working on the clubhouse design. This is kind of what we're looking at, putting it back in the same location. So we'll have to demo the current building, put this in its place. Not only a clubhouse, but also a community room and things. So that's kind of the outside of what it looked like. You'll see the patio and so on. As far as the design itself, the picture on the left is the basement. So this part right here will actually not have a basement underneath it. On the north part of the building, we have the garage door right here. We'll come in, and there will be parking for 18, and we're going electric carts. That's what we have right now. But what we want to do is we want to increase the number of carts we have, so we can maybe have some afternoon outings with maybe a business come in. And when they come in, they want to do something like this. Most of the golfers, if not all the golfers, get on carts. They can get through it quickly and so on. But the picture on the right shows you the first floor. We have a little vestibule walking into the building. And then this area right here would be the counter, the concession, some seating, kind of for the golf, mainly for the golf piece. This right here will actually be kind of an accordion wall that we have back here. So what we can do is this larger area with a fireplace, the fireplace up there, that would be the community room. So we can close off that community room, and if we have golf going on, we could still rent. Somebody wants to have a meeting, council wants to have their retreat, out here, be a good setting. We have, a number of windows, in this area, 2 doors out to the patio, and so on. This back here is office, restrooms, and then storage, for tables. But the whole idea, and then in the wintertime, it would be a year-round facility. In the wintertime, we can open this up. So then this becomes one large room for maybe somebody wants to have a larger activity or something. So that's again, this is, like I said, the first public showing of what the clubhouse, will look like.
Keith, what accounts for the increased estimate of cost on this?
Yeah. So with if you've been around on council, we started off the first time we had this in the CIP. I think we had 300,000. Then we raised it to 500. Then we went to 750, and now with going through this with the just the cost of materials and what our architect is estimating is it's just over $1 million for the thing. And now we can skimp, we could do things differently, but we started off with a 3,500 square foot building. We're down to about 3,200, just under 3,200, square feet. And it's one of those things that if we're going to do this, we wanted to do it right. So based on the initial cost estimate from our architect, that's where you see in the page, we asked for another 250,000 from the general fund of 17-18, those extra funds. So that's I really can't pinpoint one specific thing. We are looking at doing geothermal in this building versus just a traditional furnace, gas-fired furnace, and so on. That was about $30,000, a little over $30,000 to do the geothermal instead, but we think that's a much better way to go than the traditional furnace. And we're still looking at different things, siding, maybe materials and so on, that we could get that cost down.
So the large portion of the funding for building the clubhouse is not reflected in the CIP. It's in some other fund that's just not represented here, correct?
This is on page Page 139. So right now, in this year's current CIP, we have
It's not-
$750,000.
Okay, so it's
Okay,
just
so it's
previous
just-
to this.
Yep.
Okay.
It's in this current year. And we just got a little bit of a late start with the design.
Thank you.
So the goal with the clubhouse is that we can get it bid out potentially in February, and then start construction either July or August, and then we'd be open for business in April of 2020 is what we're hoping to do.
So you'll see when we talk about the budget, there's some available balance left over that remember the use of the available balance, one-time money, about $250,000 to add to this project we have budgeted so we can accomplish it for a little bit over $1 million, $1,050,000.
This is an amenity that our Parks and Rec system, I think, is long needed. If you look at some other park systems, Jester Park has a phenomenal type of lodge, and it gets a lot of utilization. So
It's a lodge, yeah.
I think this is a great piece to add to our Parks and Rec system.
Right.
Yeah. Yep. Then Moore Memorial Park, the pedestrian bridge over Squaw Creek, still having conversations with ISU to be able to do that. And then having conversations with John Joyner and others in Public Works in regards to then making a trail connection all the way up to Ontario. So we delayed this a year and we'll just have to see how we move along in the other conversations or discussions. So with this one, it's a play structure in the splash pool. We're looking at refurbishing that. It just gets worn out, especially the plastic. Some things might get replaced. Some might just get a new coating on them. And then we have the light fixtures and a pool deck and then a shelter adjacent to the parking lot. Rose Prairie, we moved this back to year 5. There's not a lot of movement from the developer on that. So we still have it in here for developing that into a park. Just not sure when it's going to happen, based on how quickly we move with developing that parcel. Okay, so that's Parks and Recreation. And one last thing with the cemetery is you can see the office is right here. And then this area that's in green, we like to do is create a funeral pavilion there. So in the wintertime, if the weather isn't conducive, you can't get to graveside, you could still have something out at the cemetery. Could be a place, just for whatever gathering, Memorial Day, the celebration and so on. And then one of the things we want to do here too is, it's not shown on this picture, but further to the north, we have one columbarium right now, and we're going to be purchasing some additional columbariums. What we want to do is kind of maybe bring those columbariums kind of to the south end of this parcel, and then have the pavilion kind of right in the middle or offset, so we can kind of bring those all into to one area is what we're looking at.
So Keith, the Memorial Day service.
Yep.
They use that little platform.
Yep, right down here.
Which really isn't necessarily in the greatest condition. What's the thoughts on keeping that? And that's kind of a nice area that people gather for the celebration. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, and we just we're having a master plan done, and right now 2 concepts. I just received them yesterday. First 2 concepts. One has that stain. The other one has it being removed. So one of the ideas would be is that with the pavilion, it'd be kind of like an open shelter and thing. So you could have some activity there, and depending on where it's placed, you could wind up still having enough space for people to gather and so on. So those are conversations that staff are going to be having over the next couple of weeks, and then we'll revise some of those concepts or kind of get down to one concept.
Will that come back to council, or is that a Parks and Rec decision?
Well, most of the time when we're working on that, if you want us to bring it back to you, you can, or we can.
What do you want to see, the location?
Well, I mean, John brings up a good point. I mean, the Memorial Day celebration is a community event, and
Yep.
I just want to make sure that cemetery continues to be a place where we can host that well.
Yeah, and that's our goal.
Okay.
We want to keep that celebration in this area. we think that by putting this pavilion in, it will enhance the celebration, not necessarily take away from it. It may look different, it may not be on that little pad that's down there anymore, but that's what our goal is. We do not want to move things to other areas. We want to make this a much nicer place to have those types of
The
events.
pavilion's in the fourth year, though.
You're right.
It's not going to happen this year.
No.
The pavilion's in the
Year
fourth
four.
year. So a lot more planning on needs to be done.
Yep.
Keith, as we're looking at adding restrooms to Gateway Hills and other parks.
Yep.
Are we looking at adding unisex bathrooms or family bathrooms, either instead of or in addition to the traditional gendered bathrooms?
Yeah, right now, and we brought this before you for Brookside, we're going with the gender neutral or unisex restrooms. And with Innis Grove, with a new restroom we're going to be putting up there, looking at the same thing. So that's kind of the trend that we're moving towards, is to make them unisex. Any other questions?
Yeah, I have a question. What's the current thinking on improvements to Franklin Park? I didn't see it mentioned in here.
Yeah, so we have there's money, 80,000 for developing Franklin Park in this current fiscal year, 18-19. So it just, we have a master plan. We have worked with the neighbors, and right now we have a master plan developed, or at least a concept. So that's another thing, working with Joanne Pfeiffer. We'll be looking at getting another meeting probably in February to say, hey, here's what we kind of listened to what you said. Here's what we're thinking. And once we get that finalized, then we'll start doing the work.
Excellent, thank you.
Yep, you're welcome.
Any other questions? Parks and Rec?
Thanks, Keith.
Thank you.
Thanks, Keith.
Have a good night.
Page 146, we're going to continue supporting the neighborhood improvement program, somewhere 50,000 a year. You look on page 148, we have the continuation of the downtown facade improvement program at 50,000 a year. And then on page 149, we'll continue with the campus town facade improvement program with 50,000 a year, right? And then last but not least, we have facilities, and Corey is here. Is Corey still here?
Yes.
Corey's coming up. He likes to bring up the rear on this.
Hey, Steve, did Main Street ask for an increase in facade grant allocation?
They wanted it to be changed to a downtown development grant.
Oh, so it wasn't the quantity or the amount of money. It was,
It's making it a more flexible grant that would allow
so it wasn't, all right.
different elements of the facade, rear facade, side
Yeah.
facade, and other sorts of improvements.
Okay.
And I think that's something that we referred to.
You refer it? I
staff.
don't remember now. Have to
I think
check my
it's on the
list.
big spreadsheet somewhere. But I don't recall, because I didn't look at that before the meeting.
I don't have my spreadsheet either, but I don't remember if you referred it or not. We talked about it.
It's on the big spreadsheet. I don't know whether it has
Been prioritized yet?
Yeah.
For Kelly? I'll have to check. Okay, Corey?
All right, I have two sheets. The first sheet on page 151 is just our City Hall improvements, which is our standard improvement project for City Hall for projects kind of outside the scope of our operating budget. Just has a slight bump in the second year for replacing some flooring in the police department. The second sheet is a new sheet we added this year. This is for, we're calling it a fabric structure, but it'd be a hoop building. This would be at the maintenance facility, behind the maintenance facility. It wouldn't be heated, but it would have light, electricity. We could plug trucks in. It would allow us to have some capacity at the maintenance facility during the winter or even the summer with storage abilities. So you can see the financing on that. We're using fleet reserve funds to pay for a little over half of that. We have reserve funds from when we since we charge departments throughout the year for their maintenance. Sometimes we make money during a year. So we built that fund up. We feel like using this amount wouldn't jeopardize our reserve fund, but would allow us to kind of gain some space and some options at the maintenance facility.
So traditionally, we would build a very expensive stick-built building to accomplish basically a storage to keep our vehicles out of the weather. And I've challenged Corey to look at a cost-effective alternative. We've never done this before. We're going to try to do this with a hoop building, substantially less. We think it'll accomplish the same goals we have for getting those vehicles out of the snow and being able to plug them in still when heated. So we hope it's a good cost-effective alternative for cost savings for our citizens. Okay.
Do the retired fire apparatus get stored out here, or is that
They
something
go to
that's,
fire station.
they stay there?
Don't think of it as retired. Think of it as we have front line and second line. So there'll be a second line with a pumper. They're stored at the fire stations. We're going to unretire it. We're going to refurbish it. And it will be in perfect working order. Okay, any questions for Corey? Two bits of information before we conclude. Look on, at the beginning of your book, page Roman numeral 8. I remember my Roman numerals. Just want to tell you, they summarize the major bond issues that we'll need to engage in based on this recommended CIP by year. What you have here are what's known as, these are the general obligation bond issues that we will have to levy bonds for in each one of the years, each one of the 5 years to accomplish the projects I've recommended. Now, these are what is known as essential corporate purpose, so none of these need a vote. None of these a vote by law, state law. So we're pretty sure this is going to happen, so they're layered on here. You'll see in our budget, we've tried, the art here is trying to have a debt service for all these. It's about a level debt service on a cents per thousand, which will allow us as we go along. You'll be talking about the Healthy Life Center, maybe new fire stations. We have the ability then to add on top of these, all the other projects we have. They're basically, as you can see, street projects. 99% of our street projects. There's some other smaller ones, basically that. So I haven't put those other projects in there. We have to be very careful if you ever put in the first year, because that ties back to our levy, and we'd have to raise taxes before we even had a vote from the people. We don't want to do that. And we're not even sure if we're going to move ahead with some of these projects. So we're going to put you in position to be able to layer those on later on, okay? Now, you know this. I want our citizens to understand there's 2 state mandated caps you have on your budget. One is what's known as the 810 levy, the $8.10 levy on your property taxes for the general levy. We also have a cap on our debt capacity, right? The amount of debt we can levy. That affects the capital improvements plan. So if you look on page Roman numeral 7, I want Dwayne to go over this to you to tell you about the state mandated debt capacity and where we are in relationship to that mandate.
Can we put this on the screen for people watching?
I think so.
Well, now you guys,
Yeah.
we need Derek.
Let's see. We want to do the
Roman numeral 5.
Well, let's see. Okay. Sorry, I want that. You have to turn our TV sideways at home.
Zoom out.
Yeah.
Thank you.
The Zoom moved. It's here. Wheel on the top now? Okay, it was the wheel on the side. Okay, we can't. There we go.
Perfect.
There we go.
That's good.
Perfect.
All right. Okay, Steve mentioned there's a couple limitations on our ability to raise taxes. One's on a levy, and that's 810 limit on the general levy. The limit's slightly different on debt, and the levy's not limited, but the amount of bonds that you can have outstanding is limited any given year to 5% of the total actual valuation. That's not your taxable valuation, but the actual value. So that's why you see a higher number there. And then by policy, you have decided to reserve 25% of that. So you don't want to go, and that's probably a really good policy, to go up to 100% of your limit, because if your valuation went down, you would be in violation of state code by then going over the limit. So in this spreadsheet, we just make an assumption of growth and valuation of about 3% a year, which is for us pretty modest assumption for valuation growth. And then we take the debt that we have existing in place and we show that paying off over time. And we also have the debt that we have coming on with the CIP that we've shown you tonight. And then we just show where we are in capacity and we're against your unreserved capacity. If you look down at this line right here, it stays around 63% the entire term of the CIP, even though your debt's going up a little bit over that time, but you'll have valuation going up at the same time. And we'll show you that on that Friday before all the departments review. We'll show how this impacts the levy, and it'll be a similar trend. Would make one mention, the police chief handed out a new CIP sheet, and that being new, that's not included in the book. So the actual amount of bonds will be going up by $240,000 tax supported, but we'll also have for that project $280,000 that will be bonds issued. So it'll count against that limit. That'll be abated by the utility funds. So when you get the final book and when you see the operating budget, that's going to reflect this new sheet, which is our latest best estimate of the cost of that radio system. So one difference from what's in the book right now. But other than that,
Everybody understand that then? Your state mandated capacity is actually larger than your own policy because you're more conservative. You're reserving 25% more than the capacity allows. But we still have, it's supposed to show you we have room to grow. There are some cities in the state who have maxed out their 810 limit, can't grow their operations budget, and actually they've maxed out their debt capacity. So they can't borrow any monies, even if they have very important projects to work on. Even if the citizen would pass a bond, they can't pass a bond issue to authorize it. It can't happen because they can't exceed that. Okay? So we're in fairly good shape here. You've done a good job with some very conservative financial policies, but that helps us in our bond rating, you understand. And that bond rating, when we do issue bonds, the higher the rating, the less we have to pay in interest. That saves the taxpayer money. So I think it pays off being conservative in your policies. You've saved the citizens money time and time again with those policies. So I think we've gone very quickly over a document that you're just seeing for the first time. I want to emphasize it's out on the website now. On our website, people can read it. All the pages are there. We are going to formally ask for public feedback on the document to the city council, but the city council is not being asked to make any decisions tonight or even next Tuesday when you get obtain the feedback from the public. We will ask you to make final decisions in connection with the operating budget. They're tied together. If you're thinking about making some substantial changes, I would like to know maybe at the beginning of our budget process, if you have some questions, think about it, not the last day, because if you say we want to add a $10 million project that's going to require a debt service, general fund debt service, is going to affect our operating budget. And we're going to have to scramble. Either you're going to accept the increase in property taxes or we'll have to scramble to cut out. So the last day is not the best day to bring it up. So if you're thinking about making a change, if you get it to us earlier, we can prepare ourselves for it with some strategies. I hope that's not a case on any major ones. Any questions you might have?
So could you confirm the schedule? So the public is going to be giving input on CIP items next Tuesday?
Next Tuesday.
Okay.
Now, again, they can write you throughout the next weeks. Because again, since you're not making your final decision until February, what is it?
The 12th.
February 12th, even if they can't show up next Tuesday, they can certainly email you or call you on suggestions. We might have left something out, I admit, or we've added things they're not too happy about. So there'll be time even after next Tuesday to get you input.
And Steve,
And we'll start our first budget overview session on February
Friday, February 1st.
with a big overview on the funds, utility rates, things like that, the 20,000 foot level of the budget. The next week we'll begin into the individual services or programs that are offered by the departments on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, beginning at
5:15.
5:15. And then the wrap-up session is very crucial. That's that wrap-up session. You make your final decisions on February
12th.
12th. Now, we do have a state mandated hearing that will follow but it's very important that all your decisions are made on the 12th. Again, it's tough to change this whole document the night of the public hearing. So I think you want to take whatever you can support. You're willing to stand up to the public and say, this is what we want. That's what we want to take to the public hearing, which is later in March.
March 5th, maybe.
Yeah, March 5th or something, I think. Does that help?
You mentioned that the CIP that we all looked at tonight is on the website now, and I think it's in the meeting area for tonight's meeting. Is it also in the finance page or somewhere else on the website, or is it just tonight's meeting?
Where are you gonna place it in?
Yeah. If it's not there, it will be.
It
Emily
will
was
be.
going
In the
to load
finance
it,
portal.
yeah.
Okay.
Yes, and I think Susan usually puts it on the scroller thing on the front page of the web page, CIP.
Oh, the featured item.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a good point. I know what you're saying. It was on really the meeting.
Right.
Yeah, that's where I see it.
And we need to keep it there, either finance and the.
Yeah, we'll put it out on finance page.
And
if we want
a
to.
related topic, are you planning to make the presentations that we saw tonight available in conjunction with that document?
People can stream the meetings. I don't know what you're asking.
We saw a lot of PowerPoints tonight with a lot of pictures that were tied to page numbers in the CIP. I think it's very helpful to have them together. So I guess I'd ask, could you please make that available too? Or do you want a motion? I don't know what to do
I
here.
think so.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
We can
think
put them
we
on
could.
the-
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great.
Nancy will do it.
We'll get it
Emily
done.
will do it.
We'll have somebody do it.
We'll get it done.
We'll make it happen.
All right, thank you.
So it's strictly you don't want the whole presentation of the meeting. Some people didn't have PowerPoint, so you just want the PowerPoints, not
Yeah.
the presentation.
Correct. I was just thinking of the slides that we don't have electronically or on paper that we saw
The
tonight.
PowerPoint presentation.
Yeah, the PowerPoints.
Sure.
Thank you.
Okay, anything else for Dwayne, Steve, or Nancy tonight? Great, thank you so much. Appreciate it. All right, we will go on to council, we got this reversed, I think. Let's do disposition of communications to council first, then we'll go to council comments. We have three. We have a letter from Gary and Kathy May regarding request to explore possibility of getting connected to city water main.
I'd move we get a staff memo on this.
Second.
All right. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed or abstaining? Motion carried. Letter from Gene Cressy requesting to incorporate $1,000 in the administrative agreement to cover costs. And then council received an email regarding, Brian, you might explain this. I'm sorry. I'm kind of stumbling around here.
You received a letter that I forwarded from Gene Cressy that was in the packets. And that requested a $1,000 administrative fee to administer the Human Services Grant project. Subsequent to Gene writing that letter and us putting it in the packets, Gene emailed, and after doing some further investigation, revised the request to $3,500. The rationale being that United Way is required to put a percentage of the funds that they administer has to go to their parent organization. And so that's funding that if we did not provide United Way locally, the ability to cut a little bit out of what you're providing, they would have to eat that cost, basically. And on top of that, they also have administrative expenses with regard to evaluating the proposals, putting together printed materials, storing documents, and so forth. And so they're requesting $3,500 to cover both the cut that has to go to United Way internationally and the administrative expenses that they have.
So this is pretty customary, so I'm totally comfortable with it. But are you bringing back the grant again to us? Like, can we just include that in the agenda item when it comes back?
So if you're amenable to the request, you can simply direct us to incorporate a $3,500 fee into the grant agreement that we're going to draft with United Way. You'll be discussing that and approving it then, and so you'll have the opportunity to
That's
amended.
my motion.
Second.
Okay.
Just to clarify, do you want that 3,500 to come off the top of the
Yeah.
250?
Yeah.
Like we do for CDBG receipts or something? Take administrative fee out first?
Yeah.
Just catch that, Aaron.
Yeah, okay.
All right. All right. Motion made and seconded. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed or abstaining? Motion carried. And the third one is email from Scan from January 10th regarding transitional letter of compliance ordinance.
I'd move that we get a memo from staff on what this would mean for us.
What does it mean for us?
The question
I
they
read it.
have is many, let's see, they want us to look at the issue of illegal rentals getting transitional letters of compliance, and they're asking us to consider 2 minor amendments that are suggested in the email. And I'd like to get a memo from staff regarding those suggestions and what this issue is. How many illegal rentals do we have that are getting LOCs?
Would this staff memo include, maybe challenges to enforcement that staff are having, or?
I think it can include anything that staff sees as related to this issue.
Okay.
Is there a second?
I'll second. And I guess at the last meeting, council agreed to have an agenda item regarding a rental property issue. That was the Warren rental property. And so I'm wondering whether it makes sense to combine this with that so that we're talking about some aspects of the rental at the same time in a meeting, rather than staging it separately with a memo and then another request added to the agenda if we see something we like, followed by yet another. What does council think?
Either way, I mean, I don't know that they're
not really the same, but
They're not related.
but they're
Yeah.
they're just
It's fine,
but it might have the same staff people present for
Yeah,
the
that's
topics.
true.
That's what it's
true, maybe.
I guess I want the memo because I'd like to know what staff's perception of the issue is, and maybe there really isn't an issue that needs to be an agenda item. That's why I'm requesting the memo instead of just putting it on the agenda. But I'd be amenable to that too.
Gloria, remind me, I thought we had addressed this a little bit in terms of trying to make sure that illegal rentals weren't able to get these transitional LLCs. I don't know why I remember that, but I thought.
We
we
did
said that.
discuss it. That's why I think I'd like to get a memo on this, because I thought we had.
We did say that it was part of it, but I suppose it's the enforcement, it's the knowledge and enforcement that becomes the challenge, perhaps.
we added some language about previously found to be illegal or something like
Yeah.
that, but it was to a different part of the ordinance as I recall it. So I'm not sure it's covered with the transitional. I just don't recall.
Well, so that's why I would
Yeah.
like to get a memo.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if anything, they're just going to run out of time on their transitional license.
Yeah, after some years.
Yeah, 1 or 2.
Okay, there's been motion made and seconded. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Motion carried. Okay. Gloria, council comment?
I don't think I have any council
Okay.
comments tonight, except to thank staff for the fine
Yep.
presentation, as always. Very informative.
David?
I just noticed today that the Ames Public Library put up a new website. It's very exciting. I clicked around. It works. Great. Check it out. Thanks. That's
Tim?
stuff. That's all.
Next Monday is Martin Luther King Jr. Day. We have a wonderful community celebration that will be held at the Ames Middle School. Cake will be served at 6 o'clock. One of the Ames High Jazz Bands will be playing, and then the program starts at 6:30 and ends at 7:30. And it's really designed for the whole family. There's a large group of kids, 100 kids, I think, choir. They'll be singing. It's really quite an impressive event. So next Monday at the Ames Middle School, invite everyone to come out.
Okay. Anything else? Chris?
Nothing tonight.
Ellen?
Nothing for me.
No.
Ellie?
Well, after a long break, I'm excited to be back and seeing you guys, and I look forward to another semester with you guys. So, yeah, that's all I got.
Good. 2 things. On Friday, There's the Chamber Women League of Voters Luncheon. That's the State of the City, County, School District. Starts at 11:30. And I think it's always a good, and I think I saw an email that is actually sold out, I believe.
It is.
So outstanding, great participation. And then I don't know if you've heard about this, but there's next Monday at 7 a.m. There's going to be a Monday Meals Volunteer Center of Story County is organizing it, and what it is that it's in conjunction with Martin Luther King Day. But the whole idea is to get people to come, have breakfast, and there's going to be 3 topics talked about in January, February, and March. It's always the third Monday. Unfortunately, the third Monday of March also is the first day of spring break. So there might be less turnout, but there's no cost. Just come. I think it'll be a great opportunity for the community to interact and dialogue, and I'm looking forward to that too. So, all right. I need a motion to go in. Oh, first of all, who wants to ask Mark the question before we go into a motion?
So Mark, do we have a legal justification to go into closed session?
Yes, we do. Iowa Code Section 20.17 subsection 3 allows us to go into closed session to discuss strategy and collective bargaining.
You knew that code section on the top of your head.
Good.
All right, I move we go into closed session.
Second.
All right, roll call.
Aye.
Hi.
Aye.
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 All right, we'll go into closed session.